Good morning, everybody. All right. So welcome. We're excited that you're all here. It's great to see everybody. It's been a fast summer, right? I had a good summer. I hope all of you had a great summer as well. This is actually number 67. This is the 67th HR Network Breakfast Seminar. And this is just really an awesome panel. So we've got two executives from iconic institutions that are both facing or managing rapidly changing environments. They both have very interesting stories, and I think we just all stand to learn a lot from the experiences that they're going to share today. Okay, so here's a look at today's agenda. Just so you know, we've streamlined the program for today. I wanted to make sure that the speakers had ample time, and I want to make sure that there's ample time for Q&A, which I suspect that there's going to be a lot of. So we're not going to do our usual high-tech audience survey. I know that the speakers have at least a couple of questions for you, the audience, and we're just going to have to tackle those questions the old-fashioned way, which is a show of hands, and that's going to be just fine. So from a housekeeping standpoint, we're committed to getting you out of here on time promptly at 9:30, just so you know. We've got you covered in terms of HRCI and SHRM credits. If you look in your handouts on page 2, you'll see all the information that you need for that. And you can also see in the handouts that for your convenience, we've added a couple of note pages towards the back. So it's that time of year again to start talking about the HR Hero of the Year. I see we have our 2015 hero in the audience, which is great. So this week we launched the nominations process. Hopefully you received an email that said exactly that. And we really appreciate the relationship that we have with all of you through the HR network. And we always feel that HR doesn't always get the recognition that it deserves, and this is really, you know, us doing our small part in terms of getting you guys that recognition. So we're really counting on you to nominate your deserving colleagues and sharing with us the stories of their great accomplishments. And we thank you in advance for all of your help in terms of making this the biggest and the best HR Hero event that we've ever done. So let's take a minute and hear from Lynn Pono. She's going to share with us her 5 o'clock club experience.
Parts of the methodology that I found most helpful was the 7 stories. And really the concept of the 7 stories of identifying not just what you're good at, but also what you enjoy doing. And I think that's something that you're not often allowed to sort of identify, I think. So that was very helpful for me, because I think through the process of elimination, that's how really I found what I was interested in. Going to a weekly meeting and being accountable in terms of where I was in my career exploration and in my job search helped a lot. I think the 5 o'clock club, it helps you sort of with your life goals in general. You know, and obviously, you know, your job is part of whatever you want to achieve in your life. And I think in that sense, it really helped me in terms of figuring out what is it that I wanted in my life, and sort of how does my job and my career fit into that.
So sorry about that. Lynn's audio wasn't up at the very beginning, so you missed a little bit. But we just want to thank Lynn for sharing her story with this audience. It's always gratifying when somebody's willing to come back and tell their story. And also kudos to Renee Rosenberg, who did a great job as her coach. So before I introduce the panel, just a few words about the 5 o'clock club. Our relatively recently new tagline reflects the importance of our unrivaled 5-step method and also our emphasis on real coaching as opposed to real estate. And our commitment to you is a high-touch premium service without a premium cost. How do we do that? We do it by giving you more of the things that really matter in an outplacement solution. And that starts with private coaching. So our packages include the most guaranteed private coaching hours per dollar spent of anybody out there. It's also about a higher level of engagement with the individual and with HR because that's our commitment to you, our HR colleagues, that you can have that little bit of peace of mind that you know you're doing the very best possible thing for that outbound employee in a difficult situation by referring them to us. It's also about more time. We offer longer duration packages so the career changers in the mix have the time and the resources that they need to successfully complete their journey. So as always, I want to thank our more than 500 corporate clients that have put their trust in us, particularly the ones that are represented in this room. And for those of you that aren't yet customers, we would love the opportunity to add you to that list. And I would also ask you to think of us for executive coaching, leadership development, team building, and a host of other custom programs. One final note of housekeeping, we're going to send you a monkey later today, not an actual monkey, but a survey monkey. And you guys are always really great about giving us that feedback. That feedback means a lot to us, so keep it coming. Our next event is January 29th. It's time once again for hot legal topics. And so we're going to have 3 very expensive employment lawyers giving you absolutely free advice. So what could be better than that? So don't miss that. You'll see a save the date going out shortly on that. So in preparation for today's seminar, I've been doing some reading about change management, and I observed a couple things that I want to share. There's a lot that's written about the importance of 3 aspects of change management. Managing change, leading change, and selling the change. And these obviously are all critical. But I observed that the aspect that gets the least attention is anticipating the need for change. And I think for both of these 100, give or take 100-year-old institutions, this in particular has been a big challenge. And I think once you find yourself in the position of having to catch up to some degree, I don't think you ever want to be back in that position again. So I think one of the interesting things that hopefully comes out of the discussion today is that we'll learn not only how these 2 executives are making an impact on their organizations by managing the change that they're in the midst of, but also how they're thinking strategically about putting in place processes and whatnot that helps them to anticipate the need for change and the ability to change in the future. If I could ask our speakers to come up to the dais now. So our first speaker is Joanne Rencher. She is the Chief People Officer of the Girl Scouts of the USA. Joanne actually began her career in the finance sector, and she's accumulated lots of great experience along the way in both the for-profit and the not-for-profit sectors, both here and abroad, in the course of her 22-ish year career. She's also, by the way,
Thanks.
I wasn't going to get into decimals. She also, by the way, recently created a members-based organization called Who's Got Next in HR. I think the website is wgninhr.com. Did I get that right? And this is for you. I mean, this is content and mentorship and other things. oriented to HR executives to make sure that they're advancing in their careers. So with that, I want to welcome you, Joanne. The floor is yours.
Awesome.
And your first slide
To use this, I just...
should be on.
It is on. Okay, awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Good morning. It's great to be here. It's a nice auditorium, nice and cozy. I don't like the podium, so I kind of like to reach out and touch, and so I'm going to maybe walk around a little bit. I hope I'm going to be a little disruptive around the comments that Darren made, and so hopefully not too much, and it'll all come together in the end, I'm sure. But I hope to actually change your mindset around change management, to be frank. I'm hoping to blow that up a little bit. I'm hoping to think about some different terms and a different perspective around change when all is said and done. If I'm successful, great. If not, you know, it gives you something to think about, right? You can go back to your neck of the woods and think about how that might or might not apply, but it's worth the try. It's worth the try for me. So why don't we get started? I'm going to dive in and we're going to talk about change in the context of the larger world of business. You know, when you think about this concept of change, and I'm going to use air quotes a lot because I have a lot, you know, I've got a lot of skepticism about the term. But when you think about change and you think about the burning platform, the reason why anyone would want to do something different in business, in a company, in an organization, there's some catalyst. Someone decides, wow, new market, new competitor, new environment. Some catalyst says, we've got to do something different. Or you wait too long and there's a burning platform that you have to address, right? And I wondered, as I was thinking about preparing for today, I wonder what the world would look like in some cases if that burning platform wasn't addressed, if the need to adapt wasn't seen in time, what would the world look like? So I did a little research, did a little homework on some of this, and here's the number. And what this number represents is really interesting. It's Apple, right? And so we know that Steve Jobs was successful as he navigated through that journey, particularly later on, and all of these wonderful inventions. But we also know, maybe, if you know a little bit about the company, they ousted him in the 80s. He was ousted. They thought he was too young, the company's growing too quickly, this guy doesn't, we can't put him at the helm. I don't even know how old he was, but there was a lack of confidence, a vote of no confidence, and so they ousted him. Scully took over and tried to think about ways to take, the Mac to another level. Product lines were introduced, they didn't work, the market wasn't reacting, and all of a sudden the shares went down, everything sort of went south. And then they brought Jobs back, and they said, hey, rescue that company. They had to cut costs. I mean, I'm sure you know the story. It's not that sort of unfamiliar from what can happen in other organizations or other companies. They brought him back. He, slowly and steadily turned it around. This resistance to the operating system of Windows that, was ruling the world, right? So how do you resist creating software that isn't compatible with Windows? So that went out the window, and literally. And they did embrace it, right? And he took a chance on this little device, this mobile, very kind of user-friendly multimedia device. Anybody know what that is? iPod, right? And what if that didn't happen? 350 million iPods would not have been sold since that point. So that's what that number represents. Just think about the what ifs around that. There's another number for you. So I'm not a fan of Starbucks, I'm sorry, okay? I'm a Dunkin' Donuts kind of gal, all right? That's just how it is. Fancy schmancy coffee, it's not my thing. But you all wouldn't have 16,850 shops to shop at for Starbucks coffee if it hadn't been for a turnaround at Starbucks. I mean, this is another story of a founder, successful, going in the great direction, and all of a sudden, he hands over the reins. What's the guy's name? Howard Schultz, I believe, right? The CEO. Well, he was the founder, he handed over the reins, and all of a sudden, the new person takes over, the new CEO, and he's resistant. He's looking at the economy, and he's not moved. He's not impressed. It's going in a different direction, and he doesn't care. 40,000 stores, that was the goal, and he was going to stick to it. 40,000 stores. So regardless of the economy, and the goal and the adaptability around what was happening around that company just didn't happen. There was no adaptability. There was a steadfast notion that they could get to 40,000 stores. McDonald's wasn't that big of a deal, not an important competitor to worry about. And then guess what happened? Everything changed, and things started to go south there too. Brought Schultz back. He got back to basics. Coffee's our product, and the whole kind of fancy schmancy, you go into the Starbucks with the internet and the ambiance of Starbucks then became the focal point. And so 16,850 shops later, here we are, right? What would you all do without Starbucks? I'd be just fine. 40 countries. Starbucks is in 40 countries. And 4 million coffee drinks sold daily. Can you imagine that? That's a lot of coffee. How about this? So Xerox, another kind of well-known brand, trouble again. They went through a lot of CEOs, actually, in a short period of time. I think they had like 2 CEOs in 2 years or some crazy number like that. And they brought Anne Mulcahy, I think her last name is, Mulcahy. I'm going to say Mulcahy. She's not here, so I can. They brought her in, Anne, and one of the first female CEOs of a Fortune 500, which is pretty cool, but she had a lot of turning around to do. I mean, things were going south. The customers weren't happy. There was a lot of disconnect in the sales force. It was a very heavily dominated sales force culture. A lot of dysfunction. So she had to go in, she had to cut jobs, she had to lay people off, she had to restructure, she had to bring those customer segments back to the parts of the organization where they needed to be married, as opposed to the reorganization that happened before. And she did all of that. I'm sure she didn't make a lot of friends, but she did it. She created a new product, she led the creation of a new product line, and sort of got back to the basics of Xerox in terms of the culture that made them successful to begin with. 12,000 active patents to date. What if? And this one is pretty cool. What if that didn't happen? Do you know what the first is for Xerox? Sorry? I don't know. Maybe. But that's not what it's a live body. Sorry? First who? Yeah, I can't even see who's saying that. There you go. So you're like right in front of me. How cool is that? The first black female CEO of a Fortune 500. What if, right? Just what if? I thought that was pretty cool. Here are the final 2. 70,000. The Red Cross has a storied history. It's another iconic brand. I used to work there as well as the chief people officer, and they have gone through a lot of change. They've gone through a lot of CEOs, and they've gone through a lot of news stories, okay? I'll just leave it there. But the interesting fact about the Red Cross is that many people don't know that they respond. They're not just on the scene, when Haiti, there's sort of a Haitian earthquake or some disaster, large international disaster going on around the world. They're not just on the scene then. Every day they respond. In New York, they respond to about 8 to 10 disasters every single day. Floods, fires, vacates, building collapses, you name it, they're there. The entire organization responds to 70,000 disasters a year. Things that don't even make the news, that you don't even know about. What if they weren't adapting, and what if they weren't changing? What would happen to those folks, those victims? And then, this one is near and dear to my heart, because it's the Girl Scouts. And these are the 2 million little girls, the volunteers of the Girl Scouts that look to us to get it right. They look to us to get it right. They look to us to get our acts together, to make the changes that are necessary, and to adapt, and to not be rigid, and to not think we have all the answers. And we often ask them for some of them 2 million volunteer girls. These are just the girls. We've got almost 1 million on the volunteer side. But what if? What if the world didn't change? What if we didn't adapt? What if we didn't evolve with our circumstances? What if, right? Oh, we have the question here. Yes. Any takers on this one? I know you know all about the cookies, all right? I don't want to hear another thing about cookies. Do you have cookies? Thin Mints, I get it. You like cookies. But what's the newest program of the Girl Scouts? Because we do a lot of other things as well. Yell it out. Come on, people. Yes, the Ranger program. Now, is it just because you never heard of it and so you figured that was a safe answer? Because it is a pretty cool program. It's a partnership with the National Park Service, where we sort of have the girls experience the outdoors through wildlife tours, museums, and other parts of nature to sort of understand the cultural and natural resources of our nation. So it's pretty cool. It was a recent partnership that was established. So thank you for knowing. It's an enduring vision at the Girl Scouts. It is one where we've had to change. This is why I get itchy and irritable about the concept of change and change management terminology. I just do. Because it's not as if you have a choice, right? What's the alternative? Remember the other examples I gave you. What if? Your environment is constantly changing. For those of us that remember our marketing courses, Pastel, the political, what is it? Help me, Greg. Political, economic, social, technology, environmental, and legal. Okay, never start saying that until you've thought about it beforehand. But everything around us is changing, and there's always some dynamic. There's the economy, there's the stock market, there's cybersecurity issues, there's new technology, there's all the legal regulations that come with even a healthcare law. Who could predict stuff like that? So there's always something that you have to react to. Now, depending on what kind of company or organization you are, some of that may or may not apply to you, but there's always something to react to. So in my view, it's more of an evolution than it is change management. That's kind of why I'm sick of change management. And I'm sick of the notion that it's a point in time, a stop and a do, as opposed to a continual cycle of adaptability where you just have to be smart about what you do and how you do it as leaders. And I want to get to that in a couple of minutes in my 9 minutes and 49 seconds that are left. The Girl Scouts is an enduring vision. We've gone through our evolution and we continue to go through it. Our goal at the end of the day is that we are the absolute best of the best in terms of a program, a sustainable program, an accessible program for girls, for all girls. At all socioeconomic levels that want programs at the Girl Scouts, that want to feel that the programs are relevant, that they're digitized, that they work at the speed of girl, as we like to say, and that we can be trusted. We want to have a membership program that is just beyond programs. It's the alumna, the folks that have long since... Any Girl Scouts in the audience? Yes. I knew it's a question that's always a safe one. We want you to know about the Girl Scouts and to see yourselves as part of the alumna population well into your latter years, and to know that maybe I want to do something about that. I don't know what that something is, but we want to be able to be clear about that value proposition for you, and that you would continue to be attracted to the organization and want to give back in whatever ways that, whatever way that means something to you. We want to be able to say that we call ourselves a part of a movement at the Girl Scouts. Sounds like a corny term, but it's, that's just how we describe it. It's a worldwide movement. We have 112 councils, and we have a headquarters right here in New York, 4 blocks up the street, and we're part of a larger movement where you've got folks. Most of the females in our Congress today were Girl Scouts. I think about 80% of our female CEOs were Girl Scouts. They're Girl Scouts all over the place. They're Girl Scouts that are changing the world, or at least attempting to change the world. And we want to be able to say that we're creating a movement-wide success that inspires that cultivates it, that facilitates it. And that we are forming those kinds of partnerships near and far, and that the leaders can say, you know what, there's something that I got from the Girl Scouts that makes me who I am today. That's our point. That's our purpose, right? And so what does that mean for us? It means continually evolving. This is why I take issue with change management all the time, and I'm starting to have these conversations internally, some successful, some not so successful around the term and what it means, because it's an evolution. We're evolving, we're learning, and then we're leading through change. In 2005 to 2010, we went through I mean, this predated me, but we went through one heck of an upheaval in the organization. We went from 300 and some odd councils to 112, okay? We had a lot of turmoil, a lot of layoffs, a lot of sort of need to kind of refresh the brand, and Girl Scouts that had been with the organization for, gosh, 30, 40, some cases 50 years. I mean, you could just imagine what that was like. A lot of the volunteers that had been on the forefront. Lot of tension. And we needed to build organizational capacity, the ability to actually do things differently and to take our brand to another level, but we had to stabilize in 2011 to 2013, where it was about integrating our, sort of business capabilities, being able to hire talent that had a different skill set, business process improvements, technology, analytics, those kinds of things that just weren't part of how the Girl Scouts did business. And I have Claire in the audience who can tell us as a historian. I have Debbie. Who else is here from the Girl Scouts? Is that it? Okay. I spotted the two of you back there. Hello. So we needed to do things differently and started to hire the talent to do what needed to be done in order to take us forward. We had to adapt, and we had to sort of, in some cases, catch up with technology, to be honest with you. And so the customer-centric philosophy and the ability to say, we are about the customer and not about ourselves. And who is the customer? It's the councils. It's the donors. It's the stakeholder groups. It's the parents. It's the volunteers. It's a large and dispersed customer base. And we needed to understand that from a very sort of back-to-basics standpoint. And so we went through a lot of those conversations in an effort that we called Customer Focus Forward. And then as we stand here today, 2014 all the way through, as we think about our new strategic plan, just approved yesterday at the board meeting, that there's an increased ability now, or demand, I should say, for us to have the ability to deliver, right? What does delivering mean? What are the outcomes that we're after? What do the girls need of the 21st century? What is data analytic? What does that mean to us in terms of understanding segments, customer segments, and things, even terminology that we hadn't used in the past? So digitizing the cookie program. I don't know if anyone has seen the digital cookie program and knows that we've got a portion of our councils selling those online. Did you know that? Yes? No? Yes? No? See? So have more to do in terms of our brand awareness and our value proposition and our ability to communicate, right? That's where we are. And so that's sort of like shaded in pie is about being unwavering through challenges and change and having a clear value proposition that we can sort of ride up and down on an elevator and say, and everybody can get it. It's not just cookies, not just Thin Mints. It's really a lot more than that, and here's what we do, and here's what that means to the girl. That's where we are, and it's really not going to ever change, right? That's why this concept of change management is something I want to help us to start pushing back on. Get the point here? Sick of change management? Am I beating it enough? So the evolution in my mind is about a foundation. It's what's the point? What are we here to do? What's the purpose? What are the strategies? What are the goals of the organization? What's the foundation? What's the whole reason for being, right? That's where everything should start. Otherwise, it's just a lot of busy work. And then in the middle, the way I like to think about it, and I don't know if you're familiar with I think it's Johnson and Scholes, the culture web. If anyone has kind of seen or read about that model, it's a really cool way to think about culture. It's a series of things. McKinsey said it's the way we do things around here. But what does that really mean in tangible terms? It's stories that people tell about the organization that represent what they do and why they do it. It's the rituals, it's the routines, it's the ways in which business gets done where people say, that was successful. That's how you get things done in this organization. It's the org structure. Is it flat? Is it hierarchical? It's the power structure. Who's got the power in the organization? Not just the executive or senior level team, but sometimes that kind of creates, there are other structures in an organization that can sort of creep in there. It's the ability to say, the control systems, how people get rewarded, or the financial aspects of how you control the books. It has a certain look and feel to it, and people understand it. And you shape the culture against what you want in terms of the mission, right? And that can change. So if you're in a software, I don't know, startup where you have to iterate and, fail fast, product design means that you've got to be flexible. People at the lowest levels have to have the decision-making authority, have to sort of know where to go quickly in order to make decisions and move it forward. You can't get stuck too long in in planning. You're about execution. And so culture should drive and should be supporting and facilitating where you want to go. And this is why, obviously, sustainability means that you've got to have the talent, you've got to have the values-driven organization and the design and the model. But for me, it's radical leadership. And in my 1 minute and 40 seconds left, the radical leadership that I'm after are these things. So I'm just going to put them up on the screen and talk really quickly to them since I have just a few minutes. These aren't new. The EQ concept is, talked and talked and talked about. Jack Welch said that basically IQ is your threshold, sort of gets you in the door. The EQ is where you sort of, these are the stars that get made, the high performers, the ones that understand their emotions and can harness them and be self-aware, but also harness emotions in order to get things done. The risk taker that's not addicted to data, where you can't make a decision without data, but you have an affection for data. You know that there's a certain sense of predictability and trends and patterns, and you can make decisions based on that, but you're not locked into that, and you can't move unless you've got the data. I think the balance there is important. A relentless decision maker in my simple view of the world is three things. It's what decisions does an organization need to make? It's not every decision. At what levels do they need to make it? Who's got the D? Who's got the decision-making authority? And then how effective are those decisions in terms of speed and quality and the yield of some of those decisions? I could say so much more about that, but a relentless decision maker has all three of those components. A truth teller, someone that can stand flat-footed and say, this is what I believe, and you believe them. You can't buy that. You can't educate around it. And a transformational leader, someone that is able to take people to another level, to another dimension, to show a big picture, say it's bigger than me, it's bigger than you, here's the bar, I'll support you, I'll help you get there. And then the balance of the X and Y. I did a LinkedIn post called The Chromosome Factor. I don't know if anyone read it. But basically it was around the concept of how women and men lead differently. And I think we have a lot to learn from each other. Men from us and our sisters, we've got a lot to learn as well. Decision making, endless buy-in, solving for every problem that doesn't exist. Conflict avoidance. I could say so much more if I had the time, but I feel like I've got two X's. Greg here has an X and a Y, and we need to figure out how to balance in terms of our styles around leadership as men and women. And so I'm not going to ask this question because I've run out of time. Oh, okay. All right. It's like, somebody tell me what to do. I'm curious about this in terms of what goes on, and I don't want to out you in terms of your own organization or company, right? But I'm sure you've got points of view in terms of these leadership traits and characteristics that I described. And whether it's in your organization today or in your experience from prior organizations, do you know at the sort of senior, let's say key leadership realm of the organization, do you feel like you've got at least who has, by a show of hands, better put, experience in an organization that has at least four out of the 6 radical leadership traits that I just shared? Can you raise your hand? Yeah. See how few, if you look around, I would count maybe a dozen or less hands. That's why I call it radical. That's why I call it radical. Not because it's like so, it's not rocket science. There's nothing new about what I said. But it's so rare. And so change management will only get you but so far. The Kotter model and the this model and the that model, those are all good. Those are the great ways to go through change. Building a coalition, creating a volunteer army, short-term wins, sustaining momentum, whatever the sort of change management techniques are, great. Without radical leadership, you got nothing. You've got nothing. Whatever you thought about the debate, I don't care about your political affiliations. I'm not interested I am, but I mean, we could talk about it later. But whatever you thought about the debate, one thing Carly Fiorina said really stuck out to me towards the end of her time. And what bigger change management is there than the world right now? The nation even that we live in as a superpower in the world, economic, immigration, oh, gosh, you name it. You've got all kinds, cybersecurity, the legal implications of the Affordable Health Care Act, you name it. There is something on the horizon for this nation. There is a big change always here and always needing to be tackled, our national security. And she said at the end, you know, it's about leadership. I'm going to bring leadership. She didn't necessarily wrap it around all of the various ills because she had already done that, but she ended on leadership because without radical leadership, you've got nothing. Change management, greatest model in the world, but you've got nothing without radical leadership. So I encourage you, we don't have to do that anymore. I encourage you to go back to the ranch and think about this. Go back to your neck of the woods. This was a nice quote that I found around the authenticity. I talked about one of those traits, the authentic truth teller. It's a CEO of Fab, Jason Goldberg. I had to clean up the expletive that he used. But basically, he wrote an open letter to the employees, and he talked about what this is. It's a startup. It's hard. We're going to make mistakes. It's a lot of sausage making. A lot of ambiguity. If you like that stuff, good. If it's your comfort zone, great. If you're interested in heading in one direction and the next day the other, and the move wasn't the best move, it's being okay with not working, things not working and not being predictable, is what he was trying to tell his employees, and he was authentic about it. This is the kind of stuff that leaders need to do and need to say and need to be authentic around. And this is why I founded the Who's Got Next in HR organization that I don't talk about a whole lot in my work sphere or at all because it's not part of the Girl Scouts. But I want HR leaders to see themselves in not just developing others towards this, but I want HR leaders to know that if you aspire to the next thing, you want to get out of HR, you want to go to the next level in HR, you want to be in the C-suite, you want to be in the top seat. Who's Got Next in HR is really founded on that belief that we need to be that kind of radical leader. So I want you to not only receive this and take it back to the ranch, but receive it for yourselves as well and talk to me about it afterwards. Finally, the call to action as I take my seat, as Darren starts to wiggle, is to think about your own company's evolution and where they are, and don't change what doesn't need to be changed, but do take that evolutionary ride and know what you're doing, know what happened before you and what needs to happen now that you're there, and know how to articulate that in a few minutes. Consider banning change management from your lexicon. And then think about the leadership traits. If not those, then tweak it. And think about how to close the gaps, 9-box, competency models. From hiring all the way through offboarding, what kind of leaders do you need and must have in order to take this evolutionary journey? So that's what I wanted to end with. And sorry I took a couple extra minutes, but I thought it was worth it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Joanne. Great stuff. Our next speaker is Greg Giangrande. And Greg is the Executive Vice President and CHRO of Time Inc. He reports directly to the CEO. He oversees all aspects of HR for a 7,000-person organization and has an HR staff of 60 people globally. Prior to joining Time Inc., he held senior roles at News Corp and Hearst. And probably many of you familiar, if you're not, you should check out his New York Post column on career advice known as Go to Greg. And with that, we're going to go to Greg.
Thank you, Darren. So I'm going to take a minute to put Joanne on the spot because I want a rebate. The Girl Scouts need to offer a group discount on the cookies, and let me tell you why. So I have a 9-year-old daughter. And of course, if anyone has children who's had to help sell cookies for children, my daughter recently wanted a prize, and you had to sell a certain number of cookies to get that prize. And of course, my wife says, well, just help her sell cookies at work. And I'm thinking, no, you can't do that because everybody's got kids and you can't have your kid come so you can't do that. But I thought, I'll be a great dad. I tell my staff, listen, tomorrow my daughter is going to come into work. I'm going to let each of you, there's about 40 in the U.S., order 2-3 boxes of cookies. I will pay for them, but she won't know that. I set her up in an office, and I said, so when she's here, you guys stroll in or call in and place your order, and then, she'll feel great. Oh, my God, she loves coming into the office anyway. And then when it comes time to pay, I will give all of you the cash, and then you'll go and pay her, and she'll collect the money. Had this figured out. 40 people, 2-3 boxes each. It's about 100 boxes of cookies, about $300. It gets her the prize. Great. Except that, payback is I'm known to pull a few pranks every now and then. So a couple of the leaders on my team thought, you know what? What a great opportunity. So after the day is done, my daughter comes in to me and says, oh my God, I can't believe how many boxes I sold. And I said, what was it, honey? And she said, I sold $1,000 worth of cookies. Let me see that order form. Everyone ordered 7, 8, 9, 10 boxes. I'm like, so there's no getting out of it now. So now she got the grand prize. I had to rent a U-Haul truck to pick up the boxes, transfer them to work. And so I want a refund or a rebate or something. Okay. My next story is, so we're having lunch with Darren, and we're talking about what this day is supposed to be like, and very sort of deadpan. I said, so Darren, what do you want? And he said, all I want is the 100-year history of time in 5-year increments. And, you can't kid a kidder. I'm like, okay. And he said, no, of course not. I want you to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, whatever you think is going to work for the audience, given the topic, is change management. But never one to back down from a challenge. Today, I'm going to give you 90 years in 90 seconds. So it's actually going to be like 87 years, so you'll just go with me on that. And so if we can start the clock and bear with me. All right, ready, set, go. Okay, so back in 1922, we had Henry Luce and Britton Haddon decide, we're going to launch a company called Time Inc., and the first magazine is Time Inc., and is Person of the Year. And then Britton Haddon passes away, moment of silence. But then, in the middle of the Depression, he launches Fortune magazine, and then Life magazine, and they start changing the culture. And they break into new media, which is radio at the time. And then Life changes the way the country is talking about world events. They coin the phrase World War II. They send the first women to the front lines. Then they launch other magazines like Sports Illustrated and come up with franchises. We get the Zapruder film. We then launch Time Magazine of the Year, changing culture. The first time the company becomes listed on the stock market in the 1960s. And the Sports Illustrated issue becomes alive, and the Fab Four. Fab Four, we bring culture to the country. Henry Luce passes away, moment of silence. Then we pick up again. His spirit lives on because Life changes the way we look at things, and so does Time. Calling for Richard Nixon's resignation. People is launched. It changes the magazine industry. Princess Di, 57 times on the cover, the most celebrated cover in the history. We acquire new companies with new passions all across the nation. And then moment of silence, because Time Warner acquires the company. Then we launch new titles, Entertainment Weekly, In Style. We launch live events with Aretha Franklin and the Essence Film Festival. We change the culture. Time, again, is breaking new ground. We acquire a magazine publisher in the UK, become the world's largest, and then something happens, 2007 and 2010. Major disruption to the entire print industry. You have the recession. You have YouTube, Twitter, iPad, iPhone, and Facebook. 98 seconds. We're going to pause here for a moment because I really do want to pause on what this major disruption was. when you think about the behavior of all of us and our children and our parents when it comes to consuming content, it was this period that really forever changed the entire landscape of print, whether it be books, newspapers, magazines, and it forever changed the entire industry of print. Much the same way that this period and the iPhone and iTunes dramatically and forever changed music, this changed the print industry. This was Time Warner's response and the kind of change that this company, this iconic company that changed culture. It didn't just chronicle culture, it didn't just chronicle history, it defined it, it changed it. The company that Luce built is inextricably linked to our nation's culture and history. And this was their response. They said, ooh, 2007 and 2010, something happened. We're not selling ad pages anymore like we used to. Our revenues are declining. We have to lay people off. We should probably do something different. So what do? We changed the CEO, which was not a bad thing, except that the CEO only lasted 6 months. Time Warner allowed it to happen. So what does Time Warner do? They put an interim structure in we affectionately called the 3 EOs. The CFO, general counsel, and the editor-in-chief running the company. Each of them lobbying for the CEO job. Each of them with a completely different vision for where the company needed to go. That lasts for nearly a year. And then Time Warner says, okay, I think we're going to land on a new CEO. And a new CEO that is really going to take this company into the digital age. So they hire Laura Lang from digital advertising. By March of 2013, she was out, and 2 of the 3 EOs were still there, and they were in. I came from News Corp, where disruption is you eat disruption for lunch. It is part of your DNA. You are restless. You see change, you see challenge, and you bulldoze over it. You embrace those opportunities. You see convention, and just because you defy convention. Everyone says it can't be done, and just because you say, okay, I'll do it. They say you can't have more than 3 networks. You say, okay, we're going to create a 4th network, Fox. Gee, that's become a pretty popular network. You say you cannot have 2 cable networks. CNN was the world's largest. There was no other cable news network. We say, no, I don't think so. We create the Fox News Network, blows CNN away. That's the DNA that I brought when I came to the company, brought in by that CEO. And so now Time Warner had to figure out what to do. What did they do? They said, okay, well, now we're going to spin you out, and you're going to be an independent public company. They do an internal search and an external search for who is going to be the CEO of the independent company. They announce the new CEO. His name was Joe Rip. And a month later, we start making our move. We acquire the American Express Publishing, Food and Wine, Travel and Leisure, Departures, adding to the portfolio, starting to put some energy back into the company. Talk about change, and then 2-3 months after that, Joe Rip and I replaced the entire executive management team. 5 months after that, cause for celebration. We are now on, we ring the bell at the stock exchange. We are an independent public company in charge of our own fate. 1 month after that, the re-engineering of the company begins. 6 months after that, the second phase of the re-engineering of the company begins. 5 months after that, the third phase of the re-engineering of the company begins. And today, we are one of the world's most dynamic, most diverse, most influential, media companies. We are not a magazine company. We're in television, we're in radio, we produce films. We are in e-commerce, we're in the live event business. We are in the business of igniting, delighting the world's passions, wherever they may be, whatever they may be. And we are still in the middle of the most disruptive, most challenging period in the history of print. Yet, there is a path, there is an energy, and there is optimism about our way forward. And so how did we do that? Where are we now? What does that mean? Now, part of this presentation was to include, at this point, Elton John's song, "I'm Still Standing," playing in the background. Thank you, but it is gratifying that the world intervened, some force intervened to really preserve Henry Luce's legacy, the legacy of this great company. He was all about innovation. He was all about leadership. He was all about change. And it is, as someone who actually started out as a journalist, never envisioned himself an HR professional, but having now, after my journalism career, only working in human resources within the media landscape, an incredible privilege to be the HR steward of his company and help lead it into its next phase and its next generation. We just came off of a leadership offsite where we were talking about how are we going to navigate the disruptive change of technology, video, Facebook, of the shift in the revenue stream from print to digital, the changing habits of consumers. There aren't as many checkout lines as there used to be because people are shopping online. And even in the checkout lines that you're on, there aren't the same front-facing stands where people were looking at magazines while they were waiting in line, and when it was their turn to put their groceries on the conveyor belt, they just threw the magazine down too. Behavior has changed. The competition for our time, our attention, our resources has made the pressure on print enormous, which is why we've had to evolve. We're not a magazine company anymore. We are the world's premium brands, bringing to consumers and audiences all of the topics and all of the passions in all of the ways in which audiences want that content and that information. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be in the e-commerce business too. But how do you take a 100-year-old legacy print company and get those employees to understand that change and the new skills, the new mindset that are going to be necessary to win in this new competitive landscape and business environment? It requires, not a term that I've used before, but I'll use it today because I think it's fabulous, radical leadership. It requires, one of my favorite lines is, a leader without followers is just going for a walk. It requires a leader to actually create some sort of compass point, some sort of goal, some sort of vision, some sort of rallying point that everyone gets excited about here, right? Because if you're just in it for a job and a paycheck, you cannot win, and you cannot be part of this. It has to be here. When John F. Kennedy said, we're going to the moon and we're bringing a man back safely, it was something that everyone rallied around. And how people internalized it at NASA was this. He visited NASA and he would, as the story goes, I wasn't there, he saw a janitor mopping the floor and he said to the person, so tell me what you do. And he said, I'm helping put a man on the moon and bring him back safely. And if you can instill that in every employee and they can believe that no matter what they do, no matter where they sit, no matter what role they play, they are part of transforming Time Inc. from what it was, the world's greatest, most influential magazine company, to what it will be, the world's greatest, most influential media network. That's leadership, and that's how you drive change. So yesterday, we, for the first time, distributed to the entire organization what that vision is, articulated on a card. There's the vision, there's the goals, our mission, and expected behaviors, articulated, bulleted. This is what it means to be a Time Inc. employee. This is where we're going, and this is how we're going to get there. These are the behaviors that we will celebrate. These are the behaviors we value. These are the behaviors we need to work together collaboratively, openly, honestly, competitively, to win. We also talked about a sense of urgency, making sure communicating and over-communicating. You've heard that a million times, but you can't overstate it. You cannot communicate too much. Because people will fill the void with whatever is in their own head or whatever is in the water cooler gossip, so you need to relentlessly communicate that vision, those goals, and those behaviors, and then you have to live them. So we put down a major marker yesterday. We put a flag down and said, this is who we are, this is where we're going, this is what we believe in, and this is how we're getting there. And then we're going to complement that with a relentless and rigorous analysis of our talent. We have changed the business structure. We have realigned and redeployed resources. We have said goodbye to many, many hundreds of terrific colleagues who either did not have the talent, the skills, or the will to make the change and drive this new journey. And that's not cold. We did it with compassion, but it had to be done. And then we relentlessly, vigorously looked at the landscape and the talent that's out there and what gaps we had, and we put every leader through their paces. A rigorous review, talent reviews of every single person. Starting with, everybody can be on. You only self-select off. And if someone self-selects off, nothing personal, wish you the best of luck, and then you quickly adapt and move on. And so that's the process we are still in. There was a bit of triage in the beginning, like a patient coming into an emergency room. You can't really think long term. You have to stabilize the patient. And we've done that over the past year. Now it's about holistic care. Now it is about long-term care and growth. Now it is about making sure that we do have the right talent and we do have great visibility into the gaps, and we have a plan for acquiring those talent gaps with new talent, and we have a plan to train and continually upgrade the skills and the awareness of the existing talent. A lot of that falls on me and my team, and it is a great challenge to have, and it is a privilege to have it. But the energy in the room that we had yesterday for that leadership offsite, for those who have emerged from that history I told you about, going back some people 10 and 20 years, and some people who've been through that 5-year period, right now to talk about change, and I think I've demonstrated, I know change. Half the company by the end of this year will have been at Time Inc. less than 3 years. And that is by strategic turnover, not regrettable turnover. That was strategic turnover. The half the company that's been here for longer than 3 years, half of those people have been here in the 3 to 5 year period, so they've only known major disruption. And the half of that, which is, in my math is correct, 1/4 of the population has been here longer than 10 years. And they know the old-time Inc., and they've been able to be stewards of and help lead the new time Inc. So we've got a great blend of history, legacy, experience with digital natives, completely sort of broad generational workforce and generational skills that make us all really optimistic about the future. Thank you very much.
Time for our speakers. That was terrific. Okay, we've got time for some questions. Let's hear from the audience. This is not a shy group. Come on.
I was hoping you were going to share what that vision was that you alluded to from your meeting yesterday. Is that possible?
I actually, can you hear me? I actually said it. I just didn't give it the great sort of packaging. It is to be the world's most influential media company, igniting and delighting the world's passions.
We've got one in the back, Miguel.
Hi, good morning. I was very impressed with both of you speaking. My question is for the gentleman. How did you develop your HR staff, and how did you keep them motivated through all of the disruption, and what skill sets were you looking for in your group?
So I am the most unlikely HR professional in the history of HR. I came from a media background and journalism background, and I was predisposed to never, ever, ever want to even walk near the personnel department. And then one day I found myself in a media company parked in the personnel department because they were trying to figure out where to put me. And then one day, the CEO of the company said, you know what, given your background and experience and way and all that, you should think about sort of personnel as a career. And I nearly coughed up a lung. And then 25 years later, here I am. And why I'm still here and why I've only been in human resources in media is because it's the only industry that would probably have me as an HR. So if I can't get a job in media, I'm going to look for a whole different career. And it's because within media, the HR profession, I said, if I'm going to do this, we're going to do this, and we're going to change the model. We're going to change the perception of what personnel was. When you think about personnel 25 years, when it's called personnel 25 years ago, and the view of personnel, the role it played, the people at the time who were in personnel and their experiences, I said, that's not me. I don't identify with that. So we're going to hire really, really smart, disruptive, challenge convention, challenge authority, people of the business. So I hired business people, I hired media people who happened to understand the business, who seemed to be of the business, and you develop those strong relationships, and when you are viewed by the business as a partner and not like the principal's office, or a officious bureaucratic office, you're able to get so much done. So over the years, I've hired people from non-traditional backgrounds, and then, people end up following you. You can't get rid of them, and then they follow you from one place to the next place. And you build an army of really radically different HR people who have a great sensibility that works for this industry. I can't tell you it would work for others, but it works here.
I would want to add something to that, if I could, if we just take a minute to say, there's this concept, and I love the concept of creating sort of the different HR professional that can understand the business and be part of the business and grow and be credible, right? I also like the concept of it going the other way, right? Because I did a post on this. It's called Bridging the Two Worlds. Is it give and take? And I think that some of the best strategies around teaching and building business acumen in the HR profession is to actually do it the other way as well, which is to have HR folks do rotational assignments or shadow or take a day in whatever department or unit and actually, to use a term that you use, which is learn another language. We got our native language down, let's learn some other languages and let's build the business acumen that way as well. So I would encourage you to sort of test that out. I'd like to start doing that on our team as well, because I think the credibility has to go both ways. And there's one thing to be said for hiring someone with a non-traditional person that sort of can lead and can be credible in the business. But there are some HR nuances and sort of technical capabilities that you do need to have in order to drive things forward, but you need both. And so what's the best way to get that, to develop that? I would get creative around that so that the bridge goes both ways. That would be the only thing I'd add to that.
Completely agree.
Hello, and thank you both for being here. I'm inspired, and I really do thank you. I have a question for both of you. Ms. Rencher, did I
Yes.
pronounce it correctly?
You did. You can call me Joe, though. It's so
Okay.
much better.
I'd like to know the difference between your strategy in HR and how you relate to key stakeholders in the profit world versus the nonprofit world, because I've just done that. I've made the transition from profit to nonprofit, so I'm very interested in that. And then I'd like to know, how is it that you are a bulldozer, a disruptor, someone that welcomes change? I need to understand, how can I sit still until the moon and the stars align?
Want to go first? Okay. Well, I'll go. You know, this goes back a few years, so I've got to sort of dig in the memory bank a little bit. But I would say the biggest difference for me was the fact that there's a definite bottom line aspect to working in the corporate world, and sort of there's just no time, right? You've got the stakeholder pressure in terms of numbers and profitability and shareholders, and you've got to be able to move on a dime in ways that there was a different expectation in putting strategies together, that you got to get it right. It's got to be best in class. Now, I was really fortunate that the profit experience I had was at a GE business, so it was under the Jack Welch kind of era, if you will. So he was infusing all of those best practices into the whole kind of conglomerate, and so I learned from the best. But there wasn't any time when you built strategy. It had to support the overall strategy. The talent had to drive the needs of your business, and sometimes your most important areas of the business from a revenue standpoint. So there wasn't room for the sort of what can sometimes be endless consensus building on the nonprofit side, and sort of the educational, sort of bring everybody along over and over and over again. There wasn't time for that. And so there's a different sort of a bottom line-ness to it. However, on the other side, strategy on the, in the nonprofit sector means that when all is said and done, and you've cultivated that understanding and those relationships, the models seem to resonate with the culture that you find yourself in the nonprofit world. People really buy in, and they've got a heart for the mission. They want to see HR succeed, and so there is an upside to that. It tends to take longer, tend to have a lot more patience. Decisions tend to have to land in a lot of different areas as opposed to sort of the straight path, if you will. So you have to be ready for that. But I think it certainly sharpens your diplomacy skills, if nothing else.
And in terms of patience, I'm not a terribly patient person, but you really have to think about the long game. And if you think about the long game and you can see long-term strategy, then it makes it easier to develop patience for different places along that journey where it's worthwhile to sit back and let things play out, and where you think you can influence. So it wasn't easy. I was tempted many times to leave. I had many opportunities to leave, but I'm very competitive. And nothing seemed better than the prospect of potentially having the company evolve into where we are today. And it happened. So it's really having the patience and the discipline to act when the moment strikes and know when to conserve energy and wait for that moment to arrive.
I'm going to ask the last question, which I'd like both speakers to comment on. It's really referencing something that Greg had commented on in terms of and we appreciate the timeliness of hearing about what you guys launched internally yesterday. I'm just wondering how important you think this vision will be in terms of the talent acquisition side of things, and your battle to find the absolute best people and bring them to the company. And Joanne, of course, I'd love you to comment on the whatever the analog is in terms of what's going on at the Girl Scouts.
Want to go that? Take that first? Yeah.
So I think it's a great question and a critical one, because it's about the really the employer value proposition, and that's not just for talent that you're attracting, but it's for your internal talent too. It's, you know, why am I here when everything else out there seems so cool and all these new media companies and digital startups? Who are we? And if you're not able to really tap into what makes the company exciting, you won't be able to get the extra sort of discretionary effort from your internal talent, and then they will think that things outside of the company are much more appealing. So, and then in terms of attracting talent, it's like, well, how do you get someone from the cool companies like Twitter and Amazon and Facebook and Apple and Google and BuzzFeed and all those companies? Why would they go to a magazine company like Time Inc.? Print is dead. So we have a critical focus marketing campaign on making sure the world knows we are not a magazine company. We are, frankly, what all of those other companies aspire to be. We are the intersection of the world's premium brands and content and technology, which none of those companies can lay claim to. They're technology companies without content and without brands, or they're big brands without technology or without. We are profitable, the world's most iconic brands, and we're leveraging technology across every platform to reach audiences that are as big as Twitter, that are as big as Facebook. That's who we reach, 1 in 2 adults in the US every single day. And when you craft that narrative, then people start feeling pride, and their step gets a little higher and a little more bouncy, and then people want to start coming here. We have zero problem attracting talent right now. I couldn't say that 2-3 years ago. Today, we do a new hire breakfast every single month, and I intentionally have people stand up, introduce themselves and where they come from. They come from Twitter, they come from Facebook, they come from Amazon, they come from academia, they come from our traditional legacy print competitors. They come from every place, because we now are at the intersection, and that's part of marketing and developing that employer value proposition for attraction, but also for retaining and pride in our internal talent.
Yeah, Greg used the word marketing, I think, like 2 or 3 times, and that was exactly where I was going to go. One of the things that we're trying to do as part of a newly designed or redesigned HR team at the Girl Scouts is to think of talent acquisition much more like the ability to market to the consumer. I mean, there was actually someone that did an article about this on, I think it was on LinkedIn that I read, the consumerization of the candidate experience. I don't know if anyone read that. But treating talent acquisition like a marketing effort and being able to say, this is my brand, don't just rest on the laurels of your brand, whether it's Time or the Girl Scouts, where people know the brand and they want to come and work. Why do they want to come work here? Is it the right talent? You know, the signature experience concept, for those that may be familiar with having a signature experience that defines who you are, what makes you unique out in the marketplace as a company, being able to say, you know what, this is what we stand for, this is how we work, good, bad, ugly, and this is who we need to attract to the organization, means that you've got to market in a very targeted, sort of source-driven way. You can't just put stuff up on Monster, the post and pray, the career builders, the things that don't necessarily get you the right talent. So the market, being more like marketers and being sort of facile in the marketing lingo and how you go about marketing to a customer and drawing them to your talent, drawing them to your brand rather, get you the right talent at the right time to do the right job and be truly in the right role. And that's what we're trying to shift to at the Girl Scouts, because we don't have problems with people not knowing who the Girl Scouts, you know, what the Girl Scouts does or what we stand for, but we do have challenges in getting people to land in the right roles through a methodology that's smooth and you know, just efficient, but also that they stay once they get here, that we don't have early turnover because they really didn't understand what they were getting into. So that marketing aspect, I think, is key.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Greg. Round of applause for our speakers. I want to thank our speakers. I want to thank all of you for being here today. Have a great fall. We'll see you at the next seminar in January. Hopefully before then, go Mets.